The International Monetary Fund has endorsed some of the tight monetary policies of the Central Bank of Nigeria, which are part of its reforms, and recommended caution on amendment of the CBN Act in order not to weaken the apex bank's autonomy. The endorsement was part of the multilateral lenders' recommendations on Nigeria in its Article 4 consultation report. IMF Assistant Director of the African Department and Mission Chief to Nigeria, Axel Shimem-Fenig, stated that, and I quote, following monetary policy tightening in February and March 2024 and a resumption of FX interventions, the Naira has started to stabilize, end of quote. While welcoming what they described as the bold reforms implemented by the President Bola Tinubu administration, the IMF executive directors commended the authorities' focus on revenue mobilization, governance, social safety nets, and upgrading policy frameworks in the face of Nigeria's significant economic and social challenges. Relatedly, Chairman of the Senate Committee on National Security and Intelligence, Senator Shehu Buba, justified the proposed implementation of the cybersecurity levy by the CBN, but no fewer than 356 members of the House of Representatives demanded an immediate halt to the proposed implementation of the cybersecurity levy. All right, so if on one hand, IMF is saying, well done, you're doing well to the CBN and the Nigerian government with regards to reforms, and then the member who proposed the bill, who supported the bill, is saying that he's standing by it and it's a good move. Your take on these stories?
So I think it was Walemo Julius Nyerere of Tanzania that famously called the IMF the International Ministry of Finance. And they think they can police people with all sorts of policies and pat on the back, which is not in tandem. All the IMF's advice have brought pain and hardship to Nigerians in over the last 1 year. And we should be careful in the over the last 1 year, I should say, and we should be careful the way we listen to the IMF. And for me, I think IMF's praise is like a rat eating your feet and blowing you at the same time. IMF said we should float. IMF knows that floating a currency in a highly dollarized economy with a country that does not have access to a lot of donor earnings is a recipe for disaster. And when this government came in, dollar to naira was about 750 on the black market, official market about 500. After the floating happened, by December, we had lost over 100% of the value of our currency. By February, when we started intervention again, we had lost about 150% of the value of the currency. That's why I don't understand when the government official was saying recently that the purchasing power of the naira has increased. I said, really? A currency that lost 150% of its value and the purchasing power increased? I mean, which kind of economics do these guys even think they know, and they just yap around on television? They say they're government officials. And now we've started intervening, but we cannot sustain the intervention, so there's a big problem now. That's why you see Naira started to grow again. So all the IMF theory did not work. As far as I'm concerned, it cost us more hardship. What will have been the order of the day? Maintaining the fundamentals. Still seeing how we can hold our currency to an extent where we start to get FDIs in. President Tinubu has been trying, but it's not been coming in. But for FDIs also to come in, you need to fix the legacy issues. IMF finally pushed us to say, okay, yes, get liquidity in through the bond market, open market operation and all of that. But we have a backlog to be able to pay on those interest rates for about $1 trillion now for our high bond yields. Liquidity did come in, but is this sustainable? Those are the problems on ground. Another part I appreciate is the fact that, yes, in the interest of whittling down the capacity of the CBN based on what happened at the last CBN, we should also throw the baby away with the bathwater and seize most of its autonomy. I totally support that as the Senate goes ahead with this review of CBN Act. We should be careful as regards that. As regards the levy, I think Mr. Falana, cybersecurity levy, Mr. Falana has come out to put a position that that levy is supposed to be paid by the banks and not us, the citizens. That the CBN should apologize for misinterpreting the law. I think the CBN too will have a legal opinion as regards that and reverse on that.
All right.
Okay, IMF, the International Financial Agency of the United Nations, part of its job is to promote international global stability, provide support for countries, and it's 190 members all over the world who fund this agency. However, IMF has a notorious reputation because of the kind of prescriptions that it gives out to, developing countries particularly. And we've had some experience with IMF in this country during the structural adjustment policy debates under the Babangida administration. So Nigerians are naturally very suspicious about IMF. And they're even more suspicious now at every time, whether in Washington, D.C., or through virtual press briefing, or through the latest one is the Article 4 consultation that has been completed, and then high praise for the Tinubu administration. So that's why, again, because of the historical, antecedent, Nigerians are very suspicious. However, in this particular Article 4 consultation report, what they've simply done is to endorse some of the reforms that have been introduced, or most of the reforms, or all the reforms that have so far been introduced by the Tinubu administration. The stabilization of the foreign exchange regime, the Naira, trying to, increase the value of the Naira, trying to pay backlog, trying to address the issue of debt and finding ways about how you can, ensure stability, the tightening of monetary policy that has been adopted in the last two monetary policy committee meetings of the central bank. All of these are consistent, with the position of IMF. But many Nigerians, as I have said, are suspicious. However, there are aspects of that report that I would like to highlight. The first was what the IMF was saying about, one, social protection, and the point that they made that, look, they are aware, through the consultations that Nigeria are in pains. But that what the Nigerian government needs to do is to scale up social protection. They also mentioned cash transfer systems. Well, to what extent has the Tinubu administration done that? To what extent will it be able to scale up social protection? Because indeed, Nigeria are feeling the pain, the pangs of these same reforms that IMF is pressing. Second, the IMF, mission chief also pointed out that, look, CBN autonomy should not be eroded, even when, the lawmakers try to amend the CBN Act. Now, that makes sense. You recall that CBN chiefs in the U.S., Jerome Powell is always saying, we are not involved in politics. Our independence is important to us. We look at data. Only yesterday, the Bank of England chief, Andrew Bailey, was also saying in response to some of the interventions that, look, we are doing our duty. It's our duty. We are not worried about general elections. So I think that that's an important point. The third point that they raised, which was not part of this Article 4 consultation, was a point about, cybersecurity framework, which the IMF says is important. We cannot argue about that. However, Nigerians are arguing about the imposition of the cybersecurity levy. Now, the Senate, the Senator Buba, has been quoting Section 44 sub 2, right? Which says, okay, this National Cybersecurity Fund will be collected and it will be managed by the Office of the National Security Advisor. But the House of Reps yesterday said it should be suspended. And that is the position of many Nigerians. And Senator Honorable Kingsley Chinda raised the same point that was raised by Femi Falana, SAN, that look, Section 42, sub 2, which Falana, SAN quoted, and the second schedule of the of this same Cybercrime Prohibition and Prevention Act is very clear on businesses that can be levied. Insurance companies, banks and other financial institutions, who again is there, GSM operators, internet service providers. Okay. These are the ones that are properly identified, in the second schedule. But what they have not now done mischievously is, as Falano SAN has argued, they've misinterpreted both the Section 42 and the Section 44 by saying that the payment of the levy will originate from electronic transfer points, so which then covers everybody. And Falano is saying they should take a second look at the law. It has to be amended. House of Reps is saying exactly the same thing. And other people have gone for that to say, look, the timing is bad. The Northern Elders Forum, the National Economic Summit Group, and even economists who have raised questions even about the Office of the NSC managing, the cybercrime fund. So these are, some of the highlights. But I think that the sum of it is that, the Senate and the House of Reps, the National Assembly, they have to take a second look at omissions, misinterpretations that have been pointed out in the amendment of the Cybercrime Act. These are the issues.
Well, just a few points with regards to the stories. The first one is just again to emphasize, whilst the IMF was endorsing CBN's tough monetary policy, it's important to mention that they were also quite clear about a well-sequenced approach to reforms. This means that the sequence is in such a way as not to further worsen the plight of the most vulnerable in society. They talked about this, especially by a commensurate provision of social infrastructure to support the most vulnerable. And I believe that that's one of the biggest criticism, even for a lot of thought leaders and analysts, in terms of the approach to these reforms. It's not, a number of times we've talked about the fact that we've looked at the corruption in fuel subsidy, the lack of provision in the budget for fuel subsidy, the fact that truly there should be a phasing out of fuel subsidy. But the manner in which it was done in terms of how it mediates without a proper plan in place to ensure that the most vulnerable were protected is one of the biggest criticisms. So whilst we're taking the endorsement or the nod of the IMF, we must also look at what the full, robust recommendation is. And that's where we talk about conditional cash transfers. We've been talking about a review of the social register for so long. I don't think that has been completed yet. We've looked at some interventions that this administration promised as a result, in an attempt to cushion the effect of these reforms. Unfortunately, this hasn't been done. Making these reforms cause untold hardships to many Nigerians, and that is the core criticism of these reforms. Not because people don't want the economy to be better or that we don't recognize the fact that there are certain tough decisions that must be made. It is that whilst those decisions are being made, the people must be at the center of these policies. There must be people-centered policies to ensure that the effect on the most vulnerable is minimal as possible. We're still looking forward to the CNG buses being launched. We're still looking forward to a review of the minimum wage. We're still looking forward to the taming of inflation. We're still looking forward to the reduction in terms of food inflation. So many other things that have been left undone whilst the masses suffer because this government wants to introduce policies that would help the economy. That's good, but we must also think of the people as well. The same goes for the recently introduced cyber security levy. And I did mention earlier that it almost seems as if they're not sensitive or aware of the needs of the people. And that's why these kinds of reforms, introductions, these policies don't quite make sense to the Nigerian people. It doesn't really make sense because at the end of the day, you're putting more pressure on an already pressured economy, an already pressured society, especially for the man on the street.